Resurrection Cemetery is in Justice, Illinois, a suburb of southwest Chicago. It was consecrated in 1904 by the Roman Catholic Church. The cemetery is large and covers 540 acres. In fact, it is one of the largest cemeteries in the United States, and its triangular shape and weird happenings have dubbed it the Resurrection Triangle. One of the cemetery's most beautiful but daunting features are the two large brass metal gates that greet its visitors. The gates, long greened from oxidation and time.
In 1976, a close inspection of the gates and a trained eye would have revealed something very unusual. Two of the bars were bent, a hand's length apart, and scorched with two black sooty handprints, complete with fingerprints. The prints had been discovered by Officer Pat Homa of the Justice Police Department after responding to a call that a woman was locked in the cemetery and shaking the gates in an effort to get out.
While the city of Chicago was quick to say that it was caused by a work truck that had backed into the fence, locals told a very different story. The marks, of course, were caused by Mary, the cemetery's resident ghost. Crowds of people gathered and came to see the marks, and soon the city cut the bent bars out and replaced it with wire fencing until the bars could be straightened and replaced. Once the bars had been straightened and replaced, they still prominently displayed the blackened areas that seemed to never oxidize back to the gate's green color. They remained in that state until 2002, when the cemetery replaced the entire front gate.
The story of Resurrection Mary is a story of a beautiful blonde, lost love, a lonely highway, tragedy, and a hitchhiking ghost. While Mary's exact origin story is not known, legends abound. The most prominent says Mary's story began at the O. Henry Ballroom in the mid-1930s. The ballroom, now called the Willowbrook Ballroom, sits just off of Archer Avenue in Willow Springs. It was a popular place for swing and big band dancing and booked the best bands of the day. And because of its secluded nature and reputation for booze, prostitution, and gambling, young people from all over Chicago's South Side flocked there.
Mary was at the O. Henry Ballroom with her boyfriend that fateful night. They spent the night dancing and drinking, but at some point,
Seriously?
their fun turned into an argument.
You can just leave.
And Mary stormed out, facing a cold walk home, alone. But as fate would have it, as she walked up Archer Avenue, alone, she was struck in a hit-and-run accident. As the driver fled, Mary was left to die.
Her parents, grieving, buried her in Resurrection Cemetery in her favorite white party dress. And it wasn't long before motorists started picking up a beautiful young blonde woman dressed in white on Archer Avenue, only to have her vanish from their vehicles at the gates of Resurrection Cemetery.
But is there any truth to this legend? Did Mary exist and die on Archer Avenue? Or is this nothing more than an urban legend, folklore, and just another of dozens of stories about vanishing hitchhiker spirits? This legend, while very similar to many others, does however seem to stem from at least some truth and offers us evidence, multiple eyewitness accounts.
The first encounters with Mary started in 1934, when numerous drivers reported that a girl tried to flag them down for rides on Archer Avenue, or attempted to jump onto the running boards of their vehicles as they passed by. Several people have had face-to-face encounters with Mary. One such encounter occurred in 1939, when Jerry Paulus reported spending almost an entire evening with the ghost. I was at the Liberty Grove and Hall, which is a dance hall, and I spied this really attractive blonde sitting in the corner. She must have sat there for a couple hours before I got the nerve to ask her to dance. She accepted, and we spent the next several hours just dancing and talking. One thing that I noticed about her was that her skin was very cold, icy really to the touch. As the evening concluded, I asked her if I could drive her home, and she agreed, giving me an address on South Demon Avenue. As we left, she asked me if I could go the way of Archer Avenue, which was strange because it was really out of the way, but I didn't care. I just wanted to spend as much time with her as I could. As I approached Resurrection Cemetery, she asked me to pull over and let her out there. I was confused, but I did pull over, and I didn't understand why she wanted to get out at such a dark and odd location. There was a row of houses just off of Archer, and I assumed that she was going to go over there. I asked her if I could walk her home. She declined and turned in a seat facing me, and that's when she said,
"This is where I have to get out, and where I'm going, you cannot follow."
I didn't understand, and before I could respond, she jumped out of the car and ran towards the gates of the Resurrection Cemetery. And right there, before my eyes, I swear to you, she vanished.
The next day, Jerry decided to go to the address she had given him, but the woman who answered the door told him that he could not have possibly spent the evening with her daughter, as she had been dead for 4 years. Paulus was shown a picture by the woman and positively identified her as the woman he had spent the evening with. There are many such encounters with Mary, all ending the same way, with her suitor for the evening shocked and confused at the gates of Resurrection Cemetery.
There were multiple Mary sightings in the 1930s, but the encounters seemed to die off until the 1970s when they picked up again. It was during this time that the cemetery was undergoing some renovations that may have caused Mary some unrest.
Bob Main, the night manager at a nightclub named Harlow's, had 2 encounters with Mary in 1973. She appeared twice in the nightclub. He said that her expression seemed to look right through you, and also described her appearance.
She was about 24 to 30 years old, 5'8" or 9. Slender with yellow blonde hair to the shoulders that she wore in these big spoolie curls coming down from a high forehead. She was really pale, like she powdered her whole face and body. She had on this old dress that was yellowed, like a wedding dress left in the sun. She sat right next to the dance floor and wouldn't talk to anyone. She danced all by herself, this pirouette type dance. People were saying, "Who is this bizarre chick?" The strangest thing was, even though we carded everyone who came in there, nobody, either night, ever saw her come in, and they never saw her leave.
When Maine and the other staff members tried to talk to the young woman to see if she was okay, the woman only shook her head.
Another well-documented Mary encounter happened in 1979 to a cab driver that apparently came in contact with her near the intersection of Archer Avenue and Willow Springs Road. This story appeared in the Suburban Tribune and was told by the cabbie, who identified himself as Ralph.
It was a Thursday night, and I was lost. I dropped this big spender way the hell down in Palo Heights, or Hills, or someplace like that, and I was trying to make my way back to the tollway. I just turned onto Archer, down there where it's still a lonely road, especially at midnight. And there she was. She was standing there with no coat on at the entrance to this little shopping center. No coat. And it's one of those really cold ones too. She didn't put her thumb out or nothing like that. She just looked at my cab. Of course I stopped. I figured maybe she had car trouble or something. She hopped right in the front seat, and she had on this fancy kind of white dress, like she'd been to a wedding or something. And those new kind of disco-type shoes with the straps and that. She was a looker. Blonde. I didn't have any ideas like that. She was young enough to be my daughter. 21 tops. I asked her where she was going, and she said she had to get home. I asked her what was wrong, if she'd had car trouble or what, but she really didn't answer. She was fuzzy. Maybe she'd had a couple of drinks or something and was just tired. I don't know. Oh, the only thing she really did say was that the snow came early this year. Other than that, she just nodded when I asked, and if we were supposed to just keep going up Archer. Mainly, she was just looking out the windows at the snow and the trees. It was obvious that her mind was a million miles away. Maybe she'd smoked something, or was on drugs or something. Who knows? A couple of miles up Archer, and there she jumped with a start like a horse. I was like, here! I hit the brakes. I looked around and didn't see any kind of house. Where? I said. And then she sticks her arm out and points across the road to my left and says, there. And that's when it happened. I looked to my left at this little shack, and when I turned, she was gone. Just vanished. And the door never opened. May the good Lord strike me dead. It never opened.
There are literally dozens and dozens of stories just like these, making Resurrection Mary the most seen ghost in the Windy City. Even though sightings and encounters have slacked off in the recent years, they still occur. Does Mary exist? If you ever find yourself along Archer Avenue, late at night, perhaps you can ask her. Don't be surprised if you find yourself magically enchanted by a ghostly beauty called Resurrection Mary.